welcome to everyone, and thank you for being part of the session today. I'm just going to go around and do some introductions for those of you that, those of us that are going to be delivering in the session today. My name's Adam Tyler. I'm Assistant Service Manager of our Practice Excellence Service and Corporate Parenting Service in Leicestershire County Council. I'm going to hand over to Liz, who works across all the authorities. Do you want to introduce yourself, Liz?
Yeah, hi, I'm Liz Dunn, and I work for the Safeguarding Children's Partnerships across Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland.
Thank you, Liz. And then also in Leicester City, we've got Tej, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, my name's Tej Garanya. I am Principal Social Worker for Children's Social Care, Early Help and Prevention.
Thank you, Tej. And then last but certainly not least, we've got Sarah.
Hi everyone, my name's Sarah Gill. I'm Principal Social Worker for Rutland County Council and Service Manager for Quality Assurance and Standards.
Fabulous. So thank you very much, everyone, for kind of joining up for the session today. The session is called The Curious Practitioner, and it's about looking at learning reviews of things that have happened across Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland. So this session has been developed across Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland as part of kind of delivering learning and training and hoping everybody kind of gets something out about, you know, what has happened locally, learning from serious incidents that have happened to children and young people, and is really the most relevant and most up-to-date information in relation to kind of what learning and development is happening across our local authorities. Just to be mindful today that we have got a number of children, we will be talking about a number of children who some of you may know, may be aware of. It's really important that we maintain confidentiality for all the children and young people that we work with today, that we'll talk about today, should I say. Some of you may know the children and young people. It's important that that remains confidential, and we will do everything that we can as a group to kind of maintain that confidentiality. But as it is, talking about, you know, real children across our local authorities, I'd really encourage everyone to just be mindful of their own self-care as well today, because obviously some of the stories and some of the pieces of information that will be shared with you may be quite upsetting and maybe quite difficult to hear, but ultimately we're sharing that because it's about a long-term plan of making sure that people have and understand, I suppose, the learning and why changes are happening across local authorities. Lovely. So the aims of the session today, we'll be considering curiosity alongside learning across LLR. So one of the kind of golden threads throughout all of the rapid reviews that we've looked at is about professional curiosity. And you don't need to look at just local reviews. You can look at more national reviews and see that professional curiosity is something that is a common theme, even if you go right back to the likes of Victoria Glimbier or Baby P, you know, which have some quite significant time has passed. Professional curiosity and how we kind of dig and delve for that additional detail is something that kind of comes out throughout a lot of reviews, and that's no different for Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland. So we're hoping to challenge your practice and learn what the themes are across the local authorities, thinking about, you know, what changes and adaptations have happened to the services because of the learning that's come from this. We're going to talk a little bit about working and engaging with reluctant or resistant families, and then we're going to have a talk about using the escalation process and the information sharing with professionals, including a new campaign that's up and running around pick up the phone. So we'll be doing that towards the end of the session. Session will have a lot of information. Yes, you will get slides, and that will be sent out and distributed at the end. We would really value your feedback as well at the end of the session, and there will be an opportunity during the middle of the session to do some group work, small group work across the departments. There was one more bit I was going to say, but it's now escaped out my head. Oh yeah, there'll be opportunities to ask any questions at the end. Likewise, you've got representative from each of your local authorities. If you're a local authority worker, you're welcome to kind of reach out to us individually. So that's absolutely fine. Just moving on then. So an overview of rapid reviews. So as part of the reason that we kind of developing these learning sessions is part of us doing rapid reviews across all of our individual local authorities. So rapid review is a review that takes place across all the multi-agencies that are involved in a child where either a serious or significant incident has happened or where there has been a death of a child. So across Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland within the scoping period of April 23 to March 24, there have been 6 rapid reviews that have taken place across the 3 authorities. For reference, rapid review isn't a serious case review. So years ago, what we would usually do is a rapid review before a decision was made by the national panel to undertake a serious case review. They're now no longer called serious case reviews. They're called local children's safeguarding practice reviews. In my head, that seems like a lot of words for a serious case review, but I suppose effectively it's the same sort of idea. The reason it changed is that local children's safeguarding practice reviews focus on the learning much earlier, and our rapid reviews kind of think about the learning much earlier in order to deliver that and make sure that gets to staff and that developments and changes to practice will happen. So as part of that, it's just about really making sure that you guys get as much information as early on about the changes and development to service and practice, rather than waiting for 2-3 years for what was a serious case review to be released, and then practice to have changed significantly during that time already. For a bit of context about the rapid reviews, one of the rapid reviews involved 2 children. The subject of all but one of these cases were female, one was a baby and one was a young child. So kind of bearing that in mind, that actually the theme really throughout a lot of these learning reviews or rapid reviews tend to be around older children. So and that maybe challenges, I suppose, what we naturally think about learning reviews, in that it's relating to babies and that they're the highest risk category, which they are, but actually some of the things you're going to hear today are around, I suppose, the second most risky category, which is teenagers and older children, and the risk that they are in. So you're going to hear some examples and some kind of pieces of work that have happened across the 3 authorities. Most of the children were white British, with one case involving a child from another white background, or although involving a black British child and another mixed heritage child. So we have got kind of a diverse background of reviews that have taken place, but it's just for context really across the authorities. Okay, so I finished my initial blurb bit, and then we're over to Liz and Ted, who are going to talk to you a little about curiosity within practice.
Great, thank you very much, Adam. Yes, so Tej and I are going to talk about professional curiosity, and we're aware that you know about professional curiosity, but it's a phrase that's kind of thrown out, isn't it, that we talk about all the time. It's definitely coming up in learning from reviews, where there's been sort of people saying that there needed to be more curiosity around this or around that, and a lot of it is around our practice as well, how we practice. So I'm just going to do a few slides on what forms professional curiosity, and then Tej is going to relate that to the case reviews we've had locally. So what forms professional curiosity? Personality. So that's sort of that desire to find out more about people, to find more about things, trends that are happening, being able to tolerate uncertainty. So actually sometimes for people who are in forward-facing roles, who work with people, they want to solve problems. So quite often we can jump to that, oh yes, I know what that is, I've had this before, without actually necessarily knowing that is what this is. So we need to have that uncertainty to find out, to actually evidence that it is what we think it might be. And then non-defensive, which actually again is something that we have to practice, because sometimes if people question us, challenge us, we can feel like it's personal. So being able to kind of think open-mindedly, which is in the next sort of on your outlook. Be open-minded, try to be quite objective and analytical about what we're finding out. Be strengths-based, so what is working well here? So we're all probably quite familiar with that around signs of safety. And then being interested in people's stories, especially if we might have heard them sort of over and over again. So, you know, this has happened before, but actually it's happening again. So we need to be open, interested in people's stories. We need to have behaviours, so we need to be questioning, we need to ask those questions, be a little bit nosy, find out the why to what's happening, and willing to challenge, which kind of fits into the sort of non-defensive bit as well. So we have to be willing to challenge, and we have to be non-defensive if we're challenged. But sometimes it can be difficult to challenge because we need to do it appropriately. We might be fearful of creating that defensiveness in someone else. So we need to sort of practice sometimes how we question. And then skills, so having that reflection, that ability to reflect, and sometimes we need to take a step back to be able to reflect. So it might be something that we do with our colleagues or managers once we've got back to base, if you like, or just to kind of think about it. We need to analyse what we've got, the information. We need to have that legal literacy. So what is it around the law that fits into safeguarding or this child, if this child might be at risk? So what is it that we know in the law that is influencing us? Okay, so, and then underneath this or alongside this, or even sort of integrated within this, is this social graces model. Now Tej's going to talk a bit more about this later, but it's that kind of understanding that people, all of us have all of these things. We have a gender, we have geography, we have our culture, we have our employment history, depending on our age, obviously. And then sexual orientation, spiritual, all of these things influence how we work. And so that needs to sit alongside. But as I said, we'll have a little bit more about that later. So professional curiosity is a combination of looking, listening and asking direct questions, checking out and reflecting on information that's received. So how do we do it? We have to test out our professional hypotheses and don't make assumptions. And what I mean by that is we do make it, of course, we all make assumptions, but what we need to do is test it out. So we might think, actually, I've worked with this sort of situation before, and this is what happened in that situation before, or this was what was happening. How do I find that out? How do I find out if that's happening here? But being open-minded to think that actually it might be wrong. It might not be that at all. So you have to kind of not make the evidence fit what you think. You have to triangulate it, which is the next bullet point, and check that you are actually, the evidence shows that you are actually right. And that triangulating is evidence from different sources. So somebody's on a parenting course, they say they're enjoying the parenting course. Are they actually attending? Do we need to know? We might need to know that. Have they actually been to that course, for example? The GP said this and we've got to do this. Do we actually know that for a fact? And for some of us in our roles, it wouldn't be appropriate to check that out. But where we can check stuff out, it's better to go back to those individuals or back to that third party that's mentioned. History of the children and their families is really important as well, because it may influence what happens. So if something happened in a crisis, what if there's a crisis again? How might that person behave? They may well have moved on, they may well be okay with a little bit of support, but we need to kind of understand that. And then that multiple sources of information. So don't just take something at face value. That's what I was talking about with the triangulating. So let's get information from lots of different people, lots of different professionals that are involved, but also other people who might have given us some information. And then having an awareness of your own personal bias, and that fits into, how we develop, our working, our view of the world, our perspectives, and some of that we will have personal bias. That's what we have, and that's okay. But we need to, we need to be aware of it, because then that might impact on how we work with other people, and we might need to take that little step back or ask somebody else if we think it's influencing our work. And then being respectfully nosy. And I kind of put that in because that's is what kind of our roles are, especially around sort of safeguarding through to child protection. We need to find out. And you know, my kids always say, you know, you're really, oh God, you're really nosy, mum. But I am quite nosy, but that's because I'm interested. I want to find out. I don't want to assume that something's happening because of something else. I want to actually find out if I'm right about that. So that sort of respectful nosiness, that respectful uncertainty that Lord Lamy mentioned in his review into Victoria Columbier. So never actually kind of wholeheartedly believing something until we've checked it out. Okay, so I'm going to now hand over to Tej, who's going to look at some of the learning from rapid reviews.
Thank you, Liz. So as Liz has just said, I'm going to look at some learning from rapid reviews that have taken place across LLR. And there's been a number of rapid reviews where professional curiosity has been a reoccurring theme. And I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about where we failed to take into account history and failed to triangulate information and made assumptions on real life cases, which is kind of where some of the themes in the rapid reviews that we undertaken. So just thinking about the first one, where a child is articulate and can express how to keep themselves safe, we mustn't always assume that they can do this. So in one of the rapid reviews that we undertook, we had a young girl who was a teenager. There was some concerns around sexual abuse, and we presumed that she was able to keep herself safe because she was of an age where she can kind of articulate herself or talk about her wishes and feelings, or if the social worker went to talk to her, she was able to kind of talk about her lived experience. There was a safety plan in place as well, and the young person knew what to do if she felt she was at risk. Unfortunately, because we thought that, and because of other reasons as well, she wasn't able to keep herself safe, and she did go on to be sexually abused. So it's really important that even though we think that people can keep themselves safe, they can't. So Adam touched on earlier, we often think that a number of our rapid reviews are on babies because they are so vulnerable, non-mobile, and unable to kind of vocalize themselves sometimes. But I think we sometimes assume that older children, teenagers, can keep themselves safe. But just a bit of a reminder, really, just to kind of check that when we are working with older children, that we mustn't just assume that they can keep themselves safe, and also think about masked vulnerability as well. Teenagers are quite good at saying that everything's okay and they can look after themselves and manage themselves. And sometimes that's a mechanism to keep themselves safe as well. So we need to kind of think about strengths and safety as well. Also, we need to think about if parents have separated and there has been domestic violence or conflict, and what the impact of this is for a child, even if parents have separated. So this came up in a rapid review that we undertook as well, and we failed to think about the impact for this child, even though the parents had separated. We weren't curious enough to think about what life was like for this child, where they were in terms of the conflict and domestic abuse between parents. What we do know is, yes, the risk is significantly reduced if a parent is no longer living in the house, but equally, even if they're out of the house, there is still a risk to that child in terms of other forms of abuse, or emotional abuse, or what they hear or see as well. We need to be curious about both carers, and also in this case, this family's English was their second language, so we did try and get interpreters where we could, but as we know, sometimes we can't. Unfortunately, we were using the other parent as an interpreter sometimes, and this isn't always the right thing to do, given the risk that one of the parents can pose to one another, and also kind of ensuring that we are getting the right information. Information can be misinterpreted, or it can be given to us wrong as well, which kind of doesn't help gather all the information we need for our assessment, and doesn't really give us a true picture for what life is like for that parent, or what life is like for that child as well. So there is a reoccurring theme again about interpreters and making sure we use them the right language, and allowing a parent to speak to us alone as well. Also, we need to think about where another theme where a child has known chronic health condition which they can manage. We must consider and understand the impact of poor and neglectful parenting on this child as well. This was a theme that came up as well. We need to be thinking about asking the right questions. Sometimes this can be masked as well, but we need to be thinking about and talking to parents and the child, what happens when you're sick, or when mum's sick or dad's sick, who is able to kind of care for this child as well. And we must consider all parenting factors that impact on the parent's ability to kind of care and keep a child safe as well. And just lastly, a really important one is assuming that parents or family members have the capacity and ability to seek support and help independently. This was a theme in a recent rapid review that we undertook as well. Unfortunately, no ethnicity was recorded for one of the parents, so we assumed that they spoke English and knew the British culture, knew how to access help and support. But unfortunately, this wasn't the case. We always assume that people can pick up the phone to social care or early help, ask for help, or access other services. But what we need to remember, and this kind of links to social graces, which we'll talk about a little bit, language and culture can be a barrier as well for families in terms of accessing support, especially domestic abuse support, people not knowing which support to access and how to as well. So we shouldn't assume that families have the capacity to seek support independently. And we also need to think about parents who have additional learning needs as well, and are they able to access support? And thinking about triangulating information, which Liz touched on as well. So this was a theme where we had presumed, where health had said they had an explanation for a child who had bruising. Children's social care did check by visiting the home to triangulate the information, but no one had received the information and had seen the home environment. And had they done this, sorry, health said they had information and we didn't double check it. And had we seen this, could have potentially led to a Section 47 investigation or a strat meeting. So it's really important that any information you have is verified, and we don't make assumptions that information has been shared. So for example, if school or health are reporting that this child has a bruise, we need to make sure that has been shared with children's social care, and vice versa. If we have some information about a child, we need to make sure that it is shared. Obviously, the information is shared at key meetings, at conferences, children in need meetings, but if there is other information that is really vital and pertinent to an assessment, we really need to make sure that that information is being checked. Even if it's being checked and shared twice, it's better that it's done that way as opposed to just assuming that we're not sharing that. Another theme that came up as well was where local authorities, different local authorities were involved in a case. Information wasn't being checked between the two different local authorities, and this could be between city and the county, city, or Rutland as well. We just presume that we're doing the right checks. There was a case where information wasn't shared, and we need to also make sure that the right people are attending strategy discussions, as this could really impact on the information that is shared to see if the threshold for a Section 47 investigation has been met, or just to make sure that we've got the right assessment, the right information to inform our assessment, so that the next correct steps are taken, and thinking about the impact for children and families as well. For example, if other local authorities have had significant involvement with previously with the family, or we have important police information which is going to change our decision making, it's really important that that information is shared. So we need the right people at the meetings as well. If people are able to attend, it's really important then we do kind of get a report from the agency that's unable to attend, or the local authority sends through information about their previous involvement, or you can sometimes go and visit the local authority and get information as well from them. So we've talked about some gaps in the rapid reviews that we've undertaken, but it's really important to share there were many positives as well, where child's voice was really heard. We'd worked with parents really well, even if they had additional learning needs or English wasn't their second language. But we've also had really good work across Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland, and there's really good evidence of multi-agency work across all the authorities to kind of share information and keep children safe as well. And finally, I've talked a little bit about this, but it's really important that we do kind of get the history of children and families we're working with. In one of the cases, for example, where we were understanding that where sexual abuse had happened, We need to know if it could happen again. Why would it, if it wasn't going to happen, why wouldn't it? What's the safety factors? What safety plans have been put in place? And we mustn't confuse strengths and safety, which I've touched on earlier, but all of that, the history is really significant in kind of helping us determine this, to think about the plan, to think about the network as well. So understanding the family's history, were previous children involved? Does the partner or mom have a previous children where there were concerns? And thinking a bit more about where was the previous father. We sometimes forget about dads if they're not in the picture, and there's a lot of work around invisible men. So it's really important that we ask the right questions about dad. Where is he? What's his name? Just the basics, to even try and get his details, even if mum will say, well, he's not in the picture, he has no contact. We need to get that name so we can do some checks on the system. There was a case in one of the rapid reviews where we thought dad was out the picture and he was in another country. So we really focused on mum and her new partner where there was concerns around domestic violence. And we didn't do any checks with the other country. We didn't kind of follow up on any information or even get dad's basic information, which could have been a safety factor for this child. And unfortunately, it wasn't. So that was some learning for us in terms of gathering and triangulating information around the history as well. Also thinking about was there evidence of neglectful parenting in the past for a parent? So thinking about the impact for that parent. What was their history of parenting? How were they parented as this impacts on their parenting capacity as well? And thinking about, has this changed over time as well? So it's really important that we do look at the history when we get a case, look at the chronology. That's a really good starting point. If chronology is not up to date, kind of try and gather that information, because it really does help inform our assessment. Think about the network, the safety, and what's changed, what are the positive changes that parents have made as well, and also thinking about how we can keep children safe as well. So that's a bit about the history. I think it's over to you now, Liz.
Yeah. So this is just kind of pulling down those things around multiple sources of information. So there were different sources of information used across rapid reviews, but sometimes there was little or no focus on the child. There were situations where there was no understanding of what daily life was like for the child, and that was sometimes because they hadn't been spoken to or seen. So in fairness, this isn't what we see a lot of the time. Across Leicestershire and Rutland, we've got a lot better at including the child's voice or that lived experience of the child. But in the rapid reviews, there were times when we hadn't got that. So it's just to be mindful that that's what we always should be doing. We always should be thinking about what that daily life is like for that child. So as I said, in some cases, there were also reviews where children had been really well supported. They'd been spoken to, heard, we'd responded to what they'd said. So, really good practice there as well. Tej has already mentioned around interpreters. So this is a key area where we're trying to do some improvements. The Safeguarding Partnership has checked that agencies have got guidance on using interpreters, and we do understand that it can be difficult at times. However, we should also strive to have best practice wherever possible. And also when we're using interpreters, to make sure that the person who's receiving the information does actually understand what it is that we're asking of them. So that's something perhaps we need to think about more. So we might have to follow that up with something in writing in their language, so that we're sure, or get some feedback from them in the conversation, to make sure that they do understand what it is that we're asking them to do, or we're asking what questions we're asking them, so that we can get the proper information. Again, as Tej has said, men were missing across the LLR rapid reviews. Obviously, this is a national issue, and it's something that's there's work being done on. We've published some practice guidance principles around working with men, and it's not helpful if we've got mum, for example, mum's boyfriend. We don't know a name, we don't know anything about this person, and then 6 months later we've got mum's boyfriend. We don't even know if that's the same person. So we need to kind of get much better at asking questions. And people say they feel a bit uncomfortable asking some of those questions, and sometimes people get really defensive when we ask them. So well, I don't see why that's relevant, they might say, for example. So we need to kind of say, where there's children around and we're involved with those children. That's why I'm asking the questions. And even we can even write down that they've been really kind of not answered the question. So at least we know some attempts been made, and there's some hostility there, perhaps, which again would kind of raise concerns, wouldn't it? Potentially raise risk as well. And because what we need to know is how often is that person, that man, that father, that new boyfriend, interacting with the child. Are they being left alone with them, for example, if mum pops out or partner pops out? So we need to understand, are they staying overnight? Are they, all of those things. Again, in several reviews, there was good evidence of multi-agency working with other agencies and practitioners. So there was evidence that there was a lot of good work there. And this isn't about saying, everybody's getting everything wrong. It's about saying this is what we can learn from, and this is where the learning is. Around personal bias, there isn't a lot of evidence of personal bias through the rapid reviews, but I think sometimes that's kind of how things are recorded, potentially. Sometimes there might have been influences around situations of domestic abuse, how they're managed. So that, as Tej said earlier, that feeling that if the partners have separated, that means safety. It can mean safety, but what does it actually mean for the child, and are they being used as a pawn in that situation? And does it mean that they are safer? We just need to check that out. There may have been assumptions that were based on personal bias, but that's kind of really difficult to quantify. So it's an area where open conversations with managers and supervisors can be helpful and supportive. I said it earlier, that checking that you're being objective, checking that there isn't some of your personal bias in there, recognising, I'm not really sure if I'm skewed, because this is similar to an experience I've had, and I feel like my judgment is coming from my experience, so I need to get that other person to help me to reflect on the what's happening. So, and that space to reflect is really important, and it's something that is difficult to find when we're in busy sort of frontline roles, but it's really good to have that kind of slow thinking where we look back at what's happened or what we've heard and think about what that actually means or what it might mean, and that's a really good way to support professional curiosity. Okay, I'm going to hand back to Tej.
Thanks, Liz. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the Social Graces tool, which Liz touched upon earlier. It's a really good tool to kind of talk about people's identity. Some of you may have already heard about this and are using this tool, but I'm just going to talk through what the tool is and why it's useful. Sometimes we really struggle to talk about and have them difficult conversations around people's social graces or their makeup that makes them a person. So this tool is really helpful to kind of have some of them difficult conversations to use within assessments, or to use on a personal level, or to even use in supervision or in team meetings as well. So what is the tool? The Social Graces is a tool designed as a starting point for examining elements which make up our identity. So it's an acronym for all the different things that make up our identity. I say it's a starting point as there are many different, as we all have different identities, and that it cannot be completely held within one tool, and the words that may mean something different to each person. So for example, someone's class may be different. What I think my class is may be different to what you think my class may be. So that's why it means different things to different people. So thinking about why is it useful? So it's really important to be aware of the different elements of our identity, or the identity of children and families we work with, and to reflect on how we see the world, our own biases, which Liz touched on, and comfort zones of why we share with others the information we share with others or not. So we need to think about this when we work with parents and children, in terms of when we are asking about their upbringing, or thinking about their culture or ethnicity. So we need to be aware of other people's identities to allow space for us to ask questions and examine the impact of each of these elements on a person's day-to-day life and overall functioning. So thinking about people's lived experience. So why are they the way they are, in terms of what makes them, and in what impacts on their parenting, but also in children, what impacts on their lived experiences as well. So it's really important that we do think about people's identity to kind of support our assessment as well, because we can't make assumptions about people. We've got to ask some of these difficult questions, and in order to ask some of these difficult questions, this is a great tool to use if we don't want to go straight into a family home and undertake an assessment. And you know, we can use some of these prompts to kind of gather some of that information. It can also be used in supervision. So think about which of the social graces are important to you, which ones have not been considered before, which one of the social graces impacting on how you view a family that you're working with, which social graces do you have similar or different to the family you're working with, and how does this then impact on your work? So if we all have some level of biases or unconscious biases, so this is an opportunity to kind of unpick some of that and think about why you're viewing a family in a certain way, and think about where your own social graces kind of are impacting on your practice, and unpick that and reflect on that as well. So we can use this with families, like I said earlier. So think about the social graces which remain hidden from your views. Some social graces are very visible in terms of, for example, our gender, and some are kind of very much hidden in terms of our culture or ethnicity. So it's a great tool to kind of think about, using this tool to kind of explore some of that, and also thinking about which ones are going to be strength related and will encourage resilience against a problem. So when thinking about different cultures, we can think about it as cultural wealth, in terms of all the strengths different cultures bring different ways of parenting, different languages, and also about people that have traveled from different countries, thinking about the trauma that they've experienced and the level of resilience that they have built. And that sometimes is a positive factor as well as a negative factor, and people may need a bit of support on that as well. And thinking about it personally as well, use the social graces to constantly reflect on the impact that these have on your thoughts and the feelings and actions within the world. What are you sharing and what are you not? So we can share some of our own social graces with the people we work with, or the families and children that we work with as well. But it's really up to you how much you want to share, and making sure that's a safe space for you. And equally, when we are using this tool with the families we work with, making sure it's a safe space for them as well, and also ensuring that we are asking questions in a trauma-informed way, and trying not to re-traumatize people as well when we are asking some of these really personal questions. It's a really good tool. I would encourage you all to go and have a look at it, or go into, if you are a member of Research in Practice, you can access the tool through Research in Practice. There's some great exercises and prompts and questions that you can use as a starting point with your own team. You could practice this in team meetings, or if you supervise people, you can use it in supervision, and also do some case scenarios, thinking about how you can use this with families we work with. You don't have to kind of use all of it. You can just pick out elements as well that would support your practice. So yes, please do go and have a look at it. So Liz is going to talk to you a little bit about being respectfully nosy.
Yes, again, thank you. So that was, as Tej said, you can access that through Research in Practice. And this is a slide just taken from Research in Practice information. And it sort of simplifies, but professional curiosity, it's that noticing novelty, so noticing what's new, what's different, so it doesn't fit in, exploring the evidence, managing any tension, so any challenges, any difficult questions, difficult conversations, and then making sense of what is happening. So does it fit in with your sort of, perhaps your theory that you had, or is it leading you in a different way? And you can see the arrows going up. It's not a sort of linear sort of way of working. You might see something and then think, oh, actually, I didn't really think that. So now I'm going down a different route, and actually now that doesn't fit with other stuff. So I need to investigate that or triangulate some information around that. So it's just a little diagram that shows that. And right at the beginning, we were talking about assumptions, and we shouldn't sort of ignore those kind of gut feelings, though. So gut feeling is different. Gut feeling is that actually I've noticed that something's different. I've noticed that novel thing. Something doesn't fit here. What they're saying isn't fitting with what I'm seeing. And it's based on everything that we know. So it's based on all of the things we've been talking about, our perspective and on life, our view on life, all of our own experience. So we should respond to it. And that's what Eileen Munro said in her review of the child protection system. She said we should respond to it, but what we shouldn't do is assume that our assumption is right. So we can make that assumption and we can have an hypothesis, a theory, but then we must check it out. So we must exercise that professional curiosity and triangulate the information. And we do that by working together to keep children safe. So we have to work with other agencies, other people that are involved with that family, talking to the child themselves and the family themselves, and or sharing information. So making sure that we share that information. And sometimes other agencies, when they think that social care is already involved, they assume that social care knows that. Oh, well, they're already involved, so they probably know that already. They might not. So any information that you think is relevant, please share it, because it helps us to think the unthinkable. So one of the reviews was around, well, we've had several reviews actually across Leicestershire and Rutland where children have been in care placements. And our assumption is that they'll be safe there because people who choose to look after children, so foster carers, are normally they are really nice people, nurturing people, but we've had situations where that hasn't been the case and children have been abused within that placement, because sometimes we don't think the unthinkable. We explain it away because we think we know about certain groups of people. We know about foster carers, we know that they're nice people, we know that residential settings for children are safe places. They're very well monitored, and people who work there are wanting to support children as well. But we must think the unthinkable. And also, in terms of assumptions, if we make assumptions, then the interventions we put in won't be the right ones. So we will not respond appropriately to the needs of the child and young person if we don't check out our assumptions. Okay. So we mustn't be afraid to ask those questions and be respectfully nosy. And I think Tej is just going to share some quotes here.
Yeah. So these quotes are for some young people where people have asked them the right question, which has kind of really supported them to kind of talk about their experiences or make some disclosures. So Danny from Lads Like Us, he's a care experienced well, an adult now actually. He said, when someone asked me those questions, it didn't open a can of worms, it opened a door to healing. So sometimes we feel that we're being a little bit nosy and asking questions that we shouldn't be asking, but actually people actually want you to ask the right questions, and then it helps them to kind of talk about their experiences or what's going on for them. Someone else had said, I feel properly seen because the people who are there to help me put in the effort to understand me and life. They acknowledge and always learning about how to help me feel safer. So it's really important that we ask the right questions, and I suppose you've got to kind of build a relationship before we can ask some of these questions as well. And there was a conference that Liz and I both went to, the Child Sexual Abuse Roadshow, and there was a lady who had been a lived survivor of sexual abuse, and she actually said when she was talking about her experience that the social worker wasn't kind of asking the right questions or asking her directly about sexual abuse. And had they asked that question, she was ready to make that disclosure. She just was waiting for someone to ask her the questions, and that would have changed so much for her in terms of what had happened to her and keeping herself safe. So it's really important to ask the questions, ask them the right way, and also think about using alternative tools to ask questions if we feel that we're not able to communicate, or that young person has may not need different ways of communicating. And think about using words and pictures or different tools and resources to ask questions as well. But don't be afraid is the message we're trying to get across in terms of asking questions. Next slide, please. So just thinking about everything we've talked to you about in terms of professional curiosity, we'd like to get you thinking a little bit now. We've done a lot of talking. So Adam is kindly going to put you in small groups. We'd like you to reflect and think about what gets in the way of professional curiosity for you as an individual, as a professional, or your organisation. So if we give you about 5 minutes to do that, talk about it amongst yourselves in your small groups, and then we'll come back and we'll ask you to kind of put what you discussed in the chat. We can have a bit of a discussion about that. Over to you, Adam.
Lovely. So I've just set the rooms up. You'll be split up into separate groups. Afterwards, what I would really encourage everybody to think about is having somebody to write something in the chat to give some feedback of what you spoke about. Where everybody's going. Clicked it already, so everybody's off. Oops. Kalpner, can I put you into a room? Is that okay? Oh, she's gone.
Hi, Adam. Yeah, hello.
Sorry, I just nipped to the bathroom.
No,
You're
it's
our
okay.
patient.
I'm good. I don't know whether it kicked me out or I
Oh no.
was you. I was in a group, wasn't I? You put me in a group.
Were you in a group? Let me try and put you in another group.
Thank you.
Patients.
I think I was in Helen Farquharson's group.
I don't know how to send you back in there, to be honest.
Let me request to join. Oh, maybe no. Yeah, it means like I'm actually requesting them to join me, which is not what I'm trying to do. But
I don't know what's happened.
let me join room anyway. Let me see.
Ah, she's gone. Okay.
Yeah, good, thanks. I was in a room, but then I got chucked out, so.
Oh dear. How's things at Sunny City?
Good, we're just waiting for the call.
Exciting times. Should we give them 2 or 3 more minutes?
Yeah, we're doing all right for time.
I think so. 40 minutes left, so we can cut.
About the same as last time.
I didn't stop the recording, so I'm hoping that I can just cut out the middle bit. So
Yeah.
I'll just cut this bit out. Or we can find someone who can do that. Right, shall we call everybody back in then?
Yeah, sounds good.
Just calling everybody back in.
Not much more. Oh, too late. Gone.
Sorry, I've cut somebody up mid-conversation. I think.
Yeah, that was me. I was in mid-conversation then. Yeah.
Stop. I'm sure there were some really interesting conversations going on. I've got some people with their microphones on. I can hear somebody chatting in the background. Not that I want to mute anyone. So let's have some feedback. Liz, if you could put the slides back up, and then let's have some feedback. If somebody from every group puts something in the chat, that would be great. If we've got anybody in the group that's feeling a little bit brave, a little bit daring, and wants to kind of say something, I would equally welcome somebody to talk up and speak what they've got. Oh, is somebody trying to say something? I can't hear if you're speaking, Michelle. I don't know. We'll just go through some of the comments in the chat. So, time to pause given the level of work, often responding to crisis. Parents at time can hold information back, i.e. new partners, access to police health systems and experienced staff. Yes, Amy's talking about the significant issues I think we have in children's social care as well. So yeah, absolutely right, Amy. Anything you wanted to add, Amy?
No, I just think it's access to systems, really. I think I had this conversation last week in the office. How helpful would it be for us to have access to the police system, just ready access, and the health system? How helpful? Because I think a lot of the time, yes, you can request that information, but that's sometimes quite a bit of time later, and you're like, oh my God, I didn't know that. And I think that is where things get missed, because I think it's the assumption from other professionals that we know everything, as we said earlier. So I think that would make our job a lot easier.
It's interesting because the technology is there and you can do it, and it is possible. You know, I suppose it's the investment in that to try and get that right. But yeah, you're absolutely right. That information sharing comes through for every review, every piece of learning, every kind of case that you have, every child or family that you work with. You know, getting that really good, balanced, strong piece of information is most probably the most crucial part of the work. But you're absolutely right. Thank you, Amy. We've got a few more comments. I can't keep up with all the comments in the chat, so I'll just dip into a few of them. So confident experience of workers, not wanting to offend people, caseloads, pressures, and that sort of area of the world. Family engagement, job titles, continuation from external agencies, time constraints, parental consent. Anyone want to kind of elaborate, or anyone else having some other conversations?
Hi, sorry, we also discussed that it's a good thing to have professional curiosity, which some of us will do. However, sometimes what happens, your curiosity leads to so much information shared with you that what do you pick and unpick and what's relevant to the assessments you are doing, and that can become a barrier because you could get a whole booklet of information, curiosity shared, but what is relevant and how do you unpick and pick? That's another barrier you can come across.
Yeah, absolutely. It's gathering that information. It's gathering relevant information, like you say, though. Yeah, absolutely right. Thank you for contributing. I've had a few more in the chat. So we spoke about confidence to ask the questions. So confidence seems to be one that comes up quite a bit. I think something around that is about building relationships, caseload, experience is dependent, confidence in the staff, fear of upsetting someone. So I think what we're getting is a number of themes. I think Tej and Liz have touched on already. So yeah, it's just really helpful to hear what everybody else's thoughts are. Any other comments from anybody else, or anybody else that would like to kind of contribute? No? Okay, we'll make a move on in that case. But thank you for all your comments, and thanks for all the conversations in the chat as well. Okay, so moving on slightly. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about a rapid review that I completed as part of my work in Leicestershire County Council. And this is a young boy who had a very, very, very near miss. He was a young boy who was of primary school age, and did fortunately survive the incident that's occurred. And I would like to kind of talk to you all a little bit about that, because a lot of the themes that Tej and Liz were talking about relate quite closely to this, and the key theme being professional curiosity. So the young boy I'm going to talk to you about was called JB. We've used his initials for confidentiality, but it was a young boy of primary school ages in the later years of primary school. It was a young boy who we reached in time and we're currently thriving in our care. So he has been removed from the care of his parents and is currently doing really well. But despite this, the local authority, we've been on a journey and development as a result of this work, and thinking about him, it is important that some of this learning is shared across all the local authorities. So the folks in Leicestershire have this learning review. We've done kind of practice sessions on this previously, but this example is slightly outside of the scoping period and is a slightly older example, but it was only kind of 18 months ago at this point now. So JB was a young boy placed in our area.
Hi, Jonah.
Sorry, we've got somebody who's not on mute. I don't know who's not on mute. I'm just going to mute some people.
I've been, like, they can't see you and can't hear you, so that's fine.
I can't hear you, but everybody can see you. Sorry, I've just muted. Oh dear. So JB was a young boy placed in our area by a neighbouring authority. So to note, it's no authority that's in the room, but he had been removed from the care of his mum, placed with his father in Leicestershire. Leicestershire had not been advised fully of the full details of the information concluding the care proceedings, and this wasn't passed to Leicestershire. It then kind of transpired that the COVID years happened, and we initially had very limited or no involvement with JB, but we recognised that this was through COVID years, and actually the agencies were not seeing JB regularly. Our first referral related to JB was when a neighbour called in saying that he'd seen JB eating out of a bin outside of the house. He was looking very thin and very tired. And inquiries were made from social care. However, no evidence was given to substantiate this. Information was passed on to the school, and the school were to continue to monitor, but we didn't hear much back about it after that period. We became involved. There was a couple of another low-level kind of referrals that went to no further action at that point. But what we then became involved when the school said that JB had been attended school after the summer holidays, and he looked very tired, very grey, very pale, having lost a lot of weight. And Dad had explained to school that tests were taking place, and Dad himself had his own health issues, including being celiac and having a gluten-free diet, and lupus as well, and was also having JB tested for that. So despite attempts and calls and unannounced visits, and a really kind of robust attempt to go out and see JB, Dad did not engage with social care, and more worryingly, he'd stopped JB attending school at the time. At this point, there was obviously a strategy discussion because we were really concerned about JB's well-being. We weren't having professionals that were seeing him regularly, and we'd had various pieces of information that were slotted together, but actually the concerns were really escalating for him. And at the point of the strategy discussion, he'd not been in school for 7 days. So strategy discussion in section 47 was agreed at the outcome of that, but to kind of be clear to everybody on the call, Dad was very skilled at playing agencies against each other. He was very skilled at diversion, very skilled at avoidance, and used a number of tactics, including saying that the family had COVID or that they were unwell and a sickness diarrhea bug, and put a number of barriers in place, basically to prevent police and social care gaining access. JB was seen on the same day as the section 47, which was recognised as a positive, but was seen in the back of a car and wearing a coat. Dad refused agencies, as in refused social care, to allow JB to be seen alone, and refused the social worker access to the property, but did allow the police in. Now, it was Dad's ability to kind of put these things in place and prevent a full, thorough section 47 happening, which kind of prevented kind of work happening with JB at the earliest point. Because of the reluctance to engage with any services during the section 47, we agreed that a way forward would be for a GP to see JB in relation to his health and potential weight loss. Dad at the time had said he'd already taken to the GP, which later we confirmed had not happened, and comes back to Liz and Tedge's point around triangulation of information. One of the other things that also came from this review was that a couple of days later, Dad did take JB to the hospital, but a delay of 2 days. On the time that JB was taken to his GP, the GP took one look at JB and took immediate action to get JB hospitalised. At this point, his weight was so dangerously low, and there were signs that his body had begun to start shutting down. He was very pale and tired, and had started to kind of bloat and swell as signs of his body not getting the nutrients and the food that was required to work. So JB was admitted to hospital for around 3 weeks at this point, whilst the local authority sought urgent orders, and JB was placed in local authority foster care. A couple of the bits of learning that really came from that is how do we as, so kind of moving on to the next slides really, how do we as a local authority plan and prepare, sorry, most probably the slide before, Liz. How do we kind of make sure that we get good multi-agency information sharing? How do we use that opportunity to really understand how schools and other agencies are working with families and how we can get the best engagement during those periods? Really thinking about what our key objectives are in situations such as this, particularly when there's issues of neglect and we've got avoidant or reluctant parents to engage with us. In an ideal sense, what came from this as well was that we needed to have thought about a neglect medical at that early stage. JB, at the time that JB's review came out was very similar time to when Arthur's reviews came out, and the similarities are quite stark and you know quite apparent in that really. We should have considered a neglect medical much earlier, and we need to consider how we respond to neglect. Sometimes having this perception that neglect is maybe a lesser form of abuse, but actually the longer term impacts of neglect are really significant, including issues towards young people's mental health, their weight, their development and growth as well. I spoke very briefly at the beginning of my kind of conversation. It's just in saying that we had a referral from a neighbour who lived next door to JB. Research and evidence shows that anonymous or referrals from schools should be taken, not schools, anonymous information or from friends or neighbours should be taken as equally as serious as referrals from professionals. Quite often it takes a lot of information, it takes a lot for a neighbour to report something through, and sometimes that can be perceived as being malicious. So really holding on to that information, really questioning it, really triangulating like Liz and Tej were talking about earlier, and trying to prove or disprove that what that has meant for that young person. When we were working with the police in relation to this, the police were saying that they had an inexperienced police officer that was out at the time, but also the police officers, the detectives that go out on the Section 47s may not have been part of your strategy discussions. So you as agencies, you as professionals or social workers that are going out on those visits, it's really important that you're the person that understands and knows the family best. So leading that and being clear about that, and maybe being clear of information sharing at that initial point to make sure that that officer that's accompanying you to that visit is fully aware of all the concerns. If we just go on to the next slide. So undertaking your visit, this is really your opportunity to engage with parents, being clear of why you're there and what you want from that joint visit, and that actually everybody in that room wants that child to be safe. And in our learning that we did with the police were quite clear that actually the use of the word safe was something that they were continuing to try and use within Section 47s as a way of recognising everybody in that room wants the child to be safe, and you have a mutual agreement that that's what you were all there for the same point. And using that language, thinking about that language that we do when we go out to see families is really important. Plotting and planning your questions and thinking about providing families with the legislative framework that you are using when you're undertaking your visits. Think about those assessments tools that you've got, whether it's DASH risk assessment, whether it's neglect toolkit, or whether it's even just as simple as using that assessment triangle. You know, really thinking about different areas of practice and understanding what the risk is and capturing that. So my final slide, the main thing in all of this is then to kind of think about and circle background and reflect how it went. Quite often in our fast-paced environments, we can get away with kind of planning for the future and child protection conferences and other bits that are happening, but actually, what have we got in front of us? Is there adequate safety in order to keep this child or young person safe? If not, do we have any other powers to escalate this? You know, and I suppose those regular conversations with your team managers and service managers, but also thinking about legal advice and what powers do the police have to achieve this. In our case, in JB, we saw him in the back of the car, but that with a coat on, and that didn't give us the evidence that we required to make sure that JB was safe and appropriate, was appropriately looked after. So thinking about that goal, thinking about, is that child safe? And when we think about the signs of safety mapping of what we're worried about, what working well, you know, really spending that time reflecting on what is keeping that child or young person safe, hanging in that middle column where we're reflecting and understanding what is happening. An interesting document that when we were putting the slides together that I was looking at was an age-old document that was over 10 years old, written by the NSPCC about 10 pitfalls and how to avoid them. Kind of rang true, really. A lot of the pitfalls rang true with the JB case. So it talks about, did you stick to your initial hypothesis and accepted the facts far too quickly? Did you triangulate that information? Could something else have been happening at the home? For our case, it most probably was a yes in all of that. Have you checked facts and that the information you received initially was accurate? You know, again, we could have questioned that because Dad was saying it was a health related issue, not neglect. Insufficient weight given to the family and friends and neighbours, you know, information provided by the anonymous sources. Again, we kind of dismissed that as kind of not being relevant at the time. And is there sufficient information and full engagement from parents in order to protect and safeguard the child or young person? So, you know, the pitfalls that were there most probably just over 10 years ago, you know, seem to continue of being, you know, relevant and appropriate within our work that we're doing at the moment. I caught up with the social worker who currently works with JB a few weeks back, who speaks that he's done really well. So he continues to be out of parents' care. He has no contact with his dad at the moment, and that remains positive for him. He's found some wonderful foster carers who meet and address his every need, and he's thriving to be an extremely positive, articulate and confident young man despite his experiences. And I suppose I finish on that because I think it's most probably important to realise that actually some of the practice that we'd achieve may have fallen short, but ultimately we you know, JB's plan at the moment is something that is positive for him, and he's progressing and doing well at the moment. Okay, over to Sarah.
Okay, so I'm just going to talk to you now about the escalation processes that we have in place, just to support you if you are finding that the information that you've gathered has met that threshold for safeguarding, but you're not sure that it's being followed in the right way. Can we move on to the next slide, please? Thank you. So the escalation process is part of our Safeguarding Children's Partnership Boards. Leicestershire and Rutland have a Safeguarding Children's Partnership Board, and Leicester City have a Safeguarding Children's Partnership Board. So the first part for any kind of escalation is to have a direct conversation with the practitioner that you've given the information to. Have a discussion, say, I'm not sure about this, there's something that's not right, I've asked this question and I think this needs escalating. If that doesn't go in the way that you would like it to go, then obviously your next point of call would be to speak to your manager, and then your manager would then have a manager discussion with the practitioner that you've passed that information on to, so the managers can hopefully resolve that and escalate the concerns if needed. If not, then you can move on to step 3, where you're talking to more senior people, and eventually you can go to the Safeguarding Children's Partnership Manager and ask them to review it. And I guess the important reason that this is in there is because in one of the rapid reviews there was an escalation, but only up to manager level, and actually it was felt that if the next step had been taken, that would have provided more weight to the safeguarding actions being taken. So I guess we wanted to share it with you today, if you have that feeling, we're asking you to be curious practitioners, to think about what you're seeing and hearing. Then don't be afraid to use these escalation processes. They're there to support you. They're not there to hinder anybody. They're there for the same reason that we all want to make sure that our children are safe that we're working with. Can we move on to the next slide, please? And then well, I just wanted to share with you the Pick Up the Phone campaign. So on the back of one of the rapid reviews, Health have developed this Pick Up the Phone campaign, and that was because one of the rapid reviews, there was a child born in one local authority and then was discharged to another local authority, and information wasn't passed across. There was an assumption that information was shared in notes, but actually picking up the phone would have made a real difference to making sure that that information had been shared. So Health have been sharing this across different local authorities that they were involved in this rapid review, and then we're also sharing it as part of our joint working as part of the Safeguarding Children's Partnership Boards. So it, I think it's a really good message for all of us to pick up the phone. COVID provided us opportunities to work virtually, and I think part of that has meant that we rely on emails a lot. In the past, we would have been on the phones all the time. So pick up the phone, talk to each other. Emails don't always read the way that we think they do. So we just wanted to share that campaign with you. So that's another outcome of one of the rapid reviews, was that Health started this campaign, and they're still sharing it now. Next slide, please. So we have come to the end, and we will be pausing it in a minute just for questions, but we really want you to give us some feedback about the session today. It's really important to us that we get that feedback so that we can think about delivering these sessions in a different way and capturing as many of your opinions as possible. And we will be